that possible for me. So, obviously March 31st, the advent of modern spiritualism, is right around the corner in a couple of weeks, and we talked about that yesterday before the seance, but I'd like to actually talk about one of my most favorite spiritualists, Andrew Jackson Davis. And he's one of the pioneers, and he was very instrumental on January 25th, 1863, of creating the first progressive Lyceum. Okay? Now, Andrew Jackson Davis was known as John the Baptist of Spiritualism, the Poughkeepsie Seer. He predicted the aeroplane and the new planet before it was discovered. But more importantly, he had a guide named Galen. And this guide, when Andrew Jackson Davis would go on his nighttime sleep, he would come across children in spirit. Okay? And that, to me, was very interesting, because it must be so difficult to lose children and then go to spirit so early. But it was the incentive for him to create the Lyceum and create tools and the organization to learn the skills of mediumship. And also we have the definition of a spiritualist being the fact that his or her religion, as a fact of the continuity of life as demonstrated but through mediumship. And I'm paraphrasing there, but also one aspect was about doing our communication in the reality of the highest teachings from Spirit. Because he believed that what he experienced when he saw the children in spirit was a pure essence and connection of true love and true communication. And that was what incentivized him. Now, Jean Kurlich mentioned about Maine. We actually have a good history in Maine. We have Harrison D. Barrett, who was the first president of NSA, and then which became NSAC, was born in Canaan, Maine. And he used to walk between Canaan and Camp Etna, which was a former NSAC auxiliary, 24 miles with his shoes, his dress shoes around his shoulder, in his sandals, to give service up at Camp Etna. He was so committed to the religion. He was also instrumental in creating the first 3 principles to protect Cora Richmond from being on, quote, trial for giving messages, because he said this is the basis of our religion. So when I was introduced to spiritualism in 1993, I was going through a very difficult time, passing of a mother that, when I look back on it, she made me promise before she died that I was not to cry for her. Okay, I was not to cry for her because she's going to a better place. So every time I would start to want to cry for her, I would suppress it. And then one day I said, you know, I've got to face this grief. And it was through this, and so I went to this Portland Spiritualist church, and there was other things in my life, lots of a job, lots of a fiance, all of that, all at the same time. So I went to the Portland Spiritualist church. The closing hymn was in the garden. And while I was in the closing hymn, and the medium at the time was Captain Tremblay, who was very instrumental in Temple Heights. But in the garden, and I didn't really know the hymn, and during that I started to feel emotional. And I said, why am I emotional? Why am I wanting to cry? And all I heard was, it's time to come home. And I said, what does that mean? And then, of course, I had just started going to, you know, I was just very brand new. This was my first experience of a spiritualist church. And I started exploring it, okay? And I realized that I was losing my connection with God. I was so engrossed in the microchip design and all of that, and doing all of that, that I was not nurturing my soul, okay? So that was a catalyst for me exploring. So I am not my credentials, I am not my microchip design. I'm spirit in a physical body. I'm the divine essence of God, okay? I really believe that in my heart, and which is why I continue to love to serve spiritualism, okay? So, as I went down this path, it's like that saying, careful what you wish for or ask for, because it turned me upside down. It made me question my job, my principles, my ethics, everything, okay? But I stuck at it. And just like Andrew Jackson Davis, he would go up in his dreams and he would reach a mountaintop, and then there was another mountaintop to climb. So that's a bit like life, right? You get to a point and then you're on a plateau and then you have to go further and forward. And I used this term of Andrew Jackson Davis's definition of mediumship quite a bit, because I realized that it's really about knowing who you are and your relationship with spirit. And it's inward, outward, onward, and upward, okay? Because you will only know who you are from your soul essence by going inward and saying, okay, who am I? What am I? What is important for me? In addition, whatever is going on for you inside will be expressed outside, okay? So, for example, me being an engineer, I would walk in a bit long-faced, I wear my emotions on the sleeve, and my bosses would go, uh-oh, they must have had a tough weekend, because our energy communicates with all of nature, okay? And so I started getting in to understand who I was and who I wasn't. Now, at the same time, about the highest, quality of communication from the spirit side of life and expressing in that, that doesn't mean you won't make mistakes. That doesn't mean you won't get angry. That's a human experience and that emotion. But as long as to me, as long as you're striving for it, you're doing those little pieces, okay? So the outward part, if your life is a mess on the outside, trust me, it's even worse on the inside, because it starts on the inside and then expresses outward. So every action I was taking was for, improving myself, okay? Improving my relationship with spirit. And then onward and upward is at every railway crossing or every, momentarily brief falling down off the cliff and feeling depressed, or life is getting too hard, etc. You will have that. It will be like that, but you just got to keep moving onward, okay? Onward and upward. Always striving for the next level. So, the other part of our pioneers are people like Mother Ann and the Shakers and Franz Anton Mesmer and Swedenborg and being mesmerized, which is now the old term for like hypnosis and so on and so forth. So all of these techniques were around 100 years ago. We just call them something different. So when Galen was taking Andrew Jackson Davis on his journeys, we might call that astral plane traveling or something, new term. But spiritualism, although March 31st, 1848 is the advent of it, it was around prior to that. That's why we call it the advent of modern spiritualism. So I want to encourage you that as you go about your life, and in fact, credentials, I sometimes get shy when I'm introduced with Graham's this, Graham's that, Graham's done this. I'm not those credentials, okay? But they are just aspects of my, quote, accomplishments that I've chosen to do, okay? They're the result of Spirit saying, it's time for you to go and do this. But I have free will, okay? And in fact, I had on Friday's workshop, we talked about with nature. Now, I do not go walking. I refused to go walking. My partner has for 20 years wanted to walk around the neighborhood just for a mile. And yet I teach about nature and how important it is for you, okay? And in fact, there was a funny experience this morning. We were coming to church and traffic stopped, and there was, and I think there were two people who had a special connection with turtles. There was this big turtle in the middle of the road. It must have been 10 to 12 inches long, nose to tail. And before one had a chance to sort of drive and avoid it, I was opening the door, jumping out. And I go out and I pick up this turtle, and its head was in and its legs were in. And you know what was interesting for me too? The 5 or 6 cars that were parked were waiting behind one. Not one of them got motivated to toot the horn, or maybe it's because in Florida you always have these animal crossings. Maybe that's the case and you're used to it. But I was like, thank you, Spirit, because to me that was also a symbolism, and also whomever was at the class, I don't want to point them out, but their sister, I believe it was their sister, and I was holding this turtle and then I dropped it down carefully. I didn't just drop it, okay? But I placed it down and I thanked the cars behind Ron for allowing me to do that. And that's an example as well of how paying attention to unusual experiences is Spirit connecting with you. So I encourage you to learn the dynamics of Spirit communication and develop a real strong relationship with Spirit, because it is definitely worth our while. And those of you who may be doing MPI, it took me 5 years to submit my first essay, by the way. So just take it however slow or however fast you wish, okay? I probably shouldn't have admitted that, but it was like I did all the actual questions. I just had a mental block about wanting to write the essay. And one year I delivered it at the national convention to the head of MPI at the time, you know. So anyway, I really want to encourage you because it has totally changed my life, okay? And what I also find is that the tools that we get from Spirit and that we learn are also important. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm proud of the credentials, but I'm not the credentials. I am just someone who has such a love for spiritualism, okay? And people sometimes say to me, I'm worried for the religion, but I'm not worried so much for the religion because it's so solid. And in reality, there are many people who believe in the spiritualist principles. They just don't happen to say that is my religion. So we're very, very fortunate to have that, and thanks to our pioneers who have given us that. And when I sort of do retire from spiritualism, so that just reminded me that I often joke because most of my family died before the age of 62, so I never expected to live to 69. So, and Spirit told me that there was something going on that I really needed to get checked out, and it turned out to be prostate cancer in 2022. And I was thinking, yeah, if I get 7 more years, no problem. But I said, no, I'm going to get this taken care of. And my oncologist, radiation person, does not believe in this. Like the nurses were saying, do not tell him you're a spiritualist. Do not tell him you're into energy medicine. But he was the person. Spirit, instead of me having to wait for 6 months for an MRI, I got it within 36 hours. Okay? So through all of it, when you come from the heart and you ask for assistance, it will be provided. Okay? The challenge is that we all like to have it, and we like to have it now. So divine timing may not be in my divine timing. Okay? So I encourage you to continue your development of your connection with Spirit, And if there are people out there who are going for credentials, then please continue the path. It's definitely worth the while, okay? And talking of which, I had a pleasant surprise today that we actually had 2 members from my church. I'm also the president of Augusta Church who come here February to March, February, March, and Scott, you said that embarrassing people, but Scott is our newest LM in the state of Maine recently, and he's going to be going for OM, and he's a certified medium. So I encourage the pastor or the pastoral committee or whomever to maybe chat with them, before they leave. You know? So, and thank you, Scott, for doing your commitment to the religion of spiritualism. So on that note, I'm going to, because as you gather, I can talk. I can talk a lot. So anyway, it's so heartwarming to be back here and in the presence of this church, because I've got a lot of friends and I met some new people this past weekend too. So I'm looking forward to an invitation back sometime soon. Okay. Thank you.